Good afternoon and welcome to Discernment Radio. I'm your host, Danielle Pailly.
And I'm your host, Cindy Wiedenauer. We are Discernment Radio, people and topics to enhance your life.
Today we are joined by Elizabeth Heck. Elizabeth is an herbalist and naturalist with over 20 years' experience working with plant medicines. She is a graduate from the University of Minnesota and continued her education apprenticing with world-renowned herbalists. When not working with plants directly, Elizabeth writes and teaches about their amazing virtues. She teaches at conferences around the United States and teaches online. Many of her courses are bestsellers. She is also the founder of Home Herb School. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you both. I'm really honored to be here.
So, Elizabeth, in your bio, you talk about learning to identify plants from an early age. Who was it that taught you, and how did that happen?
You know, really, for the most part, it was just playing in nature. Nature really was my primary teacher and still is today. I grew up in the forest. I was really fortunate to grow up in kind of a wild place. And I was always up in the trees. You could always find me up in a tree. And just playing with the plants. You know, my childhood girlfriend and I, we would do what we called making stew. We would get a big old pot and we would throw everything in there we could find, you know, berries and nuts and seeds and flowers and sticks and leaves, and we would stir it up for days, and these tannins would make it this nice, rich stew, and that was what we did. That was our playtime. I think the other influence probably would have been my dad. He taught me a lot about the trees, especially. We spent a lot of time walking in the forest, and we still do today. So I think he was probably the biggest influence, but it's hard to really pinpoint who is my teacher. You know, it's kind of like we all know what a dandelion is, but where did we learn that?
Yeah. Sounded like your calling, and it was things that you take for granted. We grew up right next to the park, and it was a different time back then where you could get lost, in the woods, and you'd eventually find your way out, and your parents didn't panic. Now you're 5 minutes away from your cell phone. You're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? I can't find my way back down the street. So, there's little things about being out there that, I miss. And so I can completely relate and just think it's fascinating that you and your friends from the very beginning were playing with herbs. Must have been your calling.
I think so. You know, there are herbalists that are plant people and there are herbalists that are people. Mm-hmm. And I'm one of those plant herbalists. You know, I'm really drawn to working with the plants.
Yeah. So what made you so passionate about using plants for healing, staying well, and as medicine?
You know, a few things. I grew up with horses, and growing up, we, didn't have a lot of money. I couldn't always, hire the vet. And we had to take care of our horses ourselves. We had to learn what to do, when to do it, how to heal them. And it dawned on me at one point that I knew how to take better care of my horses, and I had rabbits and dogs, and I could take care of the animals, but I didn't know how to take care of myself.
Wow.
And that was a really odd feeling.
Yeah.
I knew nothing. Basic cold and flu stuff or basic first aid things. I really didn't know how to handle that. So that was a goal of mine. The other passion was just the plants themselves. My downtime, I would flip through plant identification books. Some people would watch movies. I would pull out my plant identification book and just start flipping through the photos. That was my chill time.
That was fun for you.
That's absolutely.
Well, you are a very prolific instructor on many teaching sites such as Udemy and Skillshare, and you have over 50,000 students. What do you think strikes a chord in your followers, and why have you had so much success in this teaching arena? Can you tell us about your different courses, too?
Sure. I think there's a number of reasons. One is the platform I chose, which is a digital way of teaching rather than in person. I do a lot of in-person teaching as well. But teaching on a digital platform allows me to reach people on a global level. Mm-hmm. I have students in nearly every country, which just, it just blows me away. I have a student in Greenland. I have students in South Pacific Islands. I mean, it's
wow, that's awesome.
Really very, very surprising. And Udemy and some of those platforms have allowed me to obtain that kind of reach. reach. So that's one thing. Another is that I think a lot of people feel the way that I did, that they just want to learn how to take better care of themselves. We're all concerned about our health.
Yes.
So it's a very personal subject that a lot of people have an interest in. I think one of the other reasons is the subject that how I chose to approach the subject. So a lot of my fellow herbal teachers are also teaching online, and a lot of incredible instructors out there, very gifted herbalists, and a lot of them are teaching people how to become herbalists, which is wonderful. But there is a much broader reach, which is teaching those that just want to take care of themselves and take care of their families and their loved ones, and don't necessarily want to go on to become an herbalist themselves. So I think that has a much, that expands the reach as well. And I think one of the final thoughts is that I've chosen to keep my courses very affordable. There are some similar courses, and they're up in the hundreds of dollars, and there's courses up in the thousands of dollars. And I've chosen to keep that really low. On Udemy, they constantly have these sales for, $10 to $15 somewhere.
I love those sales.
Every day I get a new notification of the latest sale, But that really makes the courses very accessible to people. And it's a low risk investment for them to explore herbalism. And I also have a free course out there, and people take that free course and they're like, wow, this really exists. I really can do this. This is easier than I thought. This is neat stuff. And they continue on to my introduction course, and they're like, oh, some of the comments I see from my students are just amazing. They're so inspired and they're so excited. And I can just hear it in the words that they write and the reviews and the notes they sent to me. It's exactly how I felt at the beginning when I first discovered my first teacher. And that's very exciting. And I'm going to continue. We can talk about this a little bit later on, but I'm going to continue with my membership site in making those courses very, very accessible to people. Some of the courses that I teach are, they're all home herbalism, herbalism that you can use in your own home. Simple remedies you can make for, as I mentioned, first aid, colds and flu, kitchen medicine. How do we use garlic and ginger and honey and basil and thyme and all these, culinary spices that we're used to using? How can we use those as medicine? And they're very valuable medicine. And we're very used to working with those kinds of plants. They really border on food versus medicine. There's a big gray area there. Some of the other courses that I teach are plant walks, skincare. I have an entrepreneurial course. Just trying to think.
We'll direct everybody to your website for sure so they can see everything.
Yeah.
I'm curious because you teach in so many different countries, and yes, there are some herbs that we probably all use, but have you come across ones where somebody says, I can't get that in my country? Is there an alternate thing that I could use, and you've had to kind of experiment with something new?
I get that question all the time. Thank you for asking. The herbs that I chose to include, at least in the plant walks where people are out harvesting in the wild, I give details on identification, but I chose those plants that are those common weedy species that have made their way around the globe. They were valuable food and medicine, so people traveled with those plants as they migrated to new locations. And seeds just accidentally sometimes, especially those real invasives like the dandelion and plantain and those kind of plants, those seeds do get somehow spread around the globe. The plants that I included in those courses can be found just about anywhere, unless you're in like the sub-Saharan desert, or if you're in Antarctica. You're going to have a little trouble finding some of those plants, but they do grow globally, and that's why I did choose them. And I also chose them because they're very safe and very useful in multiple ways. But I also do have a course on growing plants, so you can grow them. And even if you don't have space, you can grow them in a pot, in a windowsill. And then I do give resources for purchasing plants as well. I do put some of my lectures out there on YouTube. The plantain one is starting to go viral in the last month, which is no surprise. Very useful plant, and it can be found anywhere. So I really go into the identification of that plant in detail. People love that, and I love to share that.
And one of the things I liked about your information too was that when you were making a tea for liver detoxification, you said it needed to taste good and that you had ways to make it more palatable so people actually used it.
And that's part of home herbalism. If people don't enjoy taking it, they won't.
Yes.
Yeah.
So is there one area that you see need for more education about herbalism?
It's hard to choose just one. But I will say one of the questions I often get is, do herbs work? And, unequivocally, yes, they absolutely do. Historically, herbs were the primary form of medicine. According to the World Health Organization, over 80% or about 80% of the population in the world uses herbs, medicinal herbs, as their primary form of medicine. And even today, our pharmaceuticals, 25% of our pharmaceuticals are derived directly from plants, and another 25% are synthesized from plants. So clearly plants do work. A lot of the pharmaceuticals that we're taking today are plants. They've been used throughout history by humans. In fact, the plants were here, millions of years before humans. And as we evolved eating those plants. Those plants take in the sunlight, they convert that to energy that we can take in. They have hundreds of chemical constituents in them that our bodies use for nourishment and for the health and the health of our cells. That's just how we evolved, by eating those plants. So, without those plants, we actually would not be here. We're that codependent on them. So yes, they absolutely do work. So if I had to pick one thing, I think that would be it. Yes, plants do work.
So what are some of the plants that you see as essential to good health?
I really like those tonic herbs. And when we use the word tonic, it really means those plants that we can use every day, just almost like as food. And a lot of them are used as foods. And we can use them long term. And they really work by, building the system, making us, healthier and stronger, both emotionally and physically, building vitality, just wonderful. And there are many different types of tonic herbs, different categories, depending on really what you're looking for. Some are very nutritive, like nettles. Some, for instance, if you maybe have a family history of cardiovascular disease, you might want to look at like hawthorn, which is a cardio tonic. There's immune tonics like those reishi mushrooms. Us herbalists, we do use mushrooms as well, in addition to plants, even though, mushrooms aren't plants, but we throw them all kind of into the same category. But it's those tonic herbs, those really nourishing, building, strengthening herbs that we use every day. I think that's what's most important.
Okay. So what do you see as the future of using plants as medicine? You mentioned that the pharmaceutical industry is already using a good 25% of plant-based medicine. Do you see it kind of shifting and becoming more like probably what our ancestors ate and used for medicine? Do you see it going back to that state versus using drugs?
I think pharmaceutical drugs have their place, and they are very useful. It's definitely not a one or the other. I think we have shifted too far to using only pharmaceuticals, not only, but too many pharmaceuticals in areas where we can use plants instead. So we're too lopsided right now. That is clearly shifting back. It was about 100 years ago or so that we really move to more of a pharmaceutical model. And back in like the 80s or 90s, there was kind of this herbal renaissance. And thank you to some of the, the great, wonderful herbalists like Rosemary Gladstar and some of those other wonderful teachers. They started bringing the herbalism back into the mainstream. And it's just been growing and exploding. And now there's herbal conferences all over the place, and there's herbal books, and there's so many resources and great teachers, and there's so much happening right now. And I see that trend continuing. I really do.
Can you tell us about your company, Home Herb School?
Yeah, Home Herb School is an area where I offer my online courses on my own platform, my own school. And I'm going to be, in the very near future, in the next few weeks here, launching a new membership site in which I make all of my courses available for monthly membership. And again, I'm keeping those costs very low, $10 to $12 a month. And students can have access to absolutely everything I teach, plus an online community. There's a lot of discussions that go on around my courses, and a lot of those are kind of, behind the scenes that other people can't see. And I really want to bring that out to a space where students can talk among each other. I can see areas where they want to, but they just don't have the ability. I haven't provided that platform for them. So that's going to be part of the membership as well. And something that I haven't touted on my website, but there will be monthly bonuses as well. So I think it's going to be really exciting.
Oh, sounds great.
Nice. Okay, so the dark side. We often hear on TV somebody has this miracle cure from some ancient jungle plant. Do you consider these fads or worthwhile, or is there a smidgen of truth that they're just blowing out of proportion?
Yes, yes, and yes. Well, I'll start with, with the obvious that we all know. There's a lot of habitat destruction going on in the world, and we are losing plants at a really rapid rate. And there are a lot of valuable medicinal plants out there that, we don't know about. And when I say we, I mean the, more industrialized countries. There's often these discussions of, we discovered this new plant. I'll just tell a really quick story. I was in the upper Amazon in Ecuador, and I was hearing about this man who had discovered, I think it was 3 plants on this land that we were on. And we were out with a couple of the Quechua indigenous people. And they showed us these plants, and they told us they had been using these plants for generations. So it wasn't any new discovery to them. And yes, the dark side. So some of what is happening is I'll use the word biopiracy, and it's a very unfortunate situation in which those wanting to make a profit off of plants use plants from, indigenous cultures, sometimes without their consent. And some of these plants are being patented. A lot of this, is having a negative effect on those indigenous cultures and their cultural heritage. And it's very unfortunate. And it's something that is being addressed, but it's something that we all need to be much more sensitive to.
Yeah, so it's even beyond, okay, this is a fad that doesn't work and you're fooling people, but now you're taking a resource that the indigenous people need and probably over-manufacturing it to depletion. Is that?
Sometimes over-manufacturing to depletion, but sometimes manufacturing without sharing the economic gains with those that...
Gotcha.
Yep, exactly. And a lot of those do work. I mean, like cassia is one of those controversial plants that is an antimalarial herb. Very successful. So, when they're touting it as successful, yes, it is. However, some of those plants are being hyped up by marketing companies as fads. And really, some of those plants we can find right here in our backyards. And that's really what I like to teach people. First of all, when plants are brought in from other countries, they go into a warehouse where they're fumigated. And I don't want that on my medicine.
Yeah.
Second of all, it's so easy to go down the street or go into our backyards and find those plants that are growing all around us. They're free, they're accessible, no matter what governmental regulations may happen. We will always have access to those plants. And so that's really, we don't need the novel plants that come from these, far away places. Let's use what's right around us.
Are there times when plants are not the answer? Do you ever see any contraindications for using plants or herbs?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes the heroic drugs, which are the pharmaceuticals, the Western pharmaceuticals, sometimes they really are necessary. The chemotherapeutic agents, for cancer, that's valuable medicine. Some of the antibiotics, for Lyme disease, it's really important to take your doxycycline, and then follow up with herbs for supporting those, the really harsh, heroic pharmaceuticals. So, absolutely, there are times when they're really lifesavers. Are there Yes. I will name one plant. You brought up fad. A couple of decades ago, the big fad was St. John's wort, which actually grows here locally. Yeah. In fact, I have a whole bunch of it right down the street from me. That was a big fad, and there was a real big problem where there were some transplant patients that were given by their physicians St. John's wort to help with mood after the transplant. And what happens with St. John's wort is it can clear out the pharmaceuticals from your liver and clear those out of your system pretty quickly. And so these transplant patients were, they were taking their what do you call the transplant drugs to, make your body accept the transplant.
I don't know, but we know what you mean.
Yeah. And those were being cleared out of the body. And actually some of those patients died. So yeah, very serious. We always tell people, if you're taking St. John's wort, be careful about your birth control pills, be careful about any pharmaceuticals you're taking, because it can clear those out of your system too quickly. So yes, there are contraindications, and there's more stories than that, but that's just one example for you.
Which is why people should become educated and not just play without having some kind of foundation, which is what you offer. Do you see a future for those interested in becoming an entrepreneur using herbs and plants as a business base? Do you teach people to become teachers?
I don't teach people to become teachers. I would be happy to, but it's not one of the courses I offer. But I do have an entrepreneurial course in creating a natural products business, because I've been there, done that. And it was I had all these resources that I just wanted to share. So I did put that out there. There's an exploding market in all of it, because there's such a renewed interest, that renaissance, back in the 80s and 90s that I was talking about. Many more people are open to taking herbs, either for, preventative reasons, just to stay healthy before getting sick, which is how herbs really do shine. I mean, it's one of their best attributes. Or taking them for life critical situations. And it's becoming more accepted and more popular, and there's more education out there about it. So for those that want to make products, for those that want to teach, for those that want to write books, for those that want to see clients. Some people are the people herbalists, and they love seeing clients and helping clients. There's a lot of potential out there. There really, really is. It's an exciting time to be an herbalist.
So how many years study would you recommend before someone feels truly comfortable formulating their own herbal remedies, other than the formulas that you actually teach?
It really depends what you want to do. I'll start with what I teach. What I teach is just some basic recipes that you can make at home with very safe herbs. I don't teach any herbs that you need to be worried about. I mean, they're like food grade herbs, kind of those tonic herbs that we talked about earlier. But if you want to get into working with herbs that are a bit more specific, then you need to use those with a bit more caution, and it takes more training. If you're going to be making formulas that you're going to be selling commercially, I would suggest getting enough training, the same amount of training as you would to become a practitioner seeing clients.
Wow.
And that is about 1,600 hours. It's a lot of training. So there's a huge area in between. You can take my 1-hour course and learn how to make some remedies at home, or you can go through that really extensive training. It really depends exactly what you want to do with it.
Now, I'm really curious when you mentioned being a plant person or a people person. What do you mean by those two types of people?
As an herbalist, I like to work with plants. I'm a plant grower. I'm a plant formulator. I teach about the plants. My favorite courses to teach are the plant walks, and that's what I like to do in person quite a bit. I used to give several a week for about 10 years. And so that's really what I like to do. Being a people herbalist is someone who has an office, sees clients, does, detailed intakes. It's usually a couple-hour intake, and works with clients to help with their health situation. Does that clarify it?
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
So please tell us, where can people learn more about you and your work?
My website is homeherbschool.com, and you will find the list of all of the courses that I teach there, and my bio is there as well. So that's probably the best place. Also has links to my Pinterest and YouTube and Facebook page.
Elizabeth Heck, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you both for having me. This was fun.
Thank you for listening to Discernment Radio. If you like the show, please click to follow.